I want to welcome to the program Lana Domino, a friend of the Brian Terry family. And Lana, thanks for coming on the program again tonight. It's good talking to you.
Hi, Cam. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now I know that the Terry family released a statement today. I want to read it if I can, so we can talk about it. The Terry family, like most of America, is sickened to read the latest revelations relating to ATF's error-plagued and misguided Fast and Furious investigation. It is beyond our comprehension that U.S. federal law enforcement agencies were not talking with one another. American citizens deserve better from their public servants. The FBI, DEA, ATF, and U.S. Attorney personnel in Arizona should have been coordinating their investigative and prosecutorial efforts. This coordination should have started and continued with basic information sharing and deconfliction. One can only imagine that if the FBI, DEA, and U.S. Attorney personnel had only shared their information with ATF agents, that the Miramontes brothers were FBI informants, that the entire Fast and Furious debacle could have been avoided. With this single piece of information, ATF could have chosen not to proceed with Operation Fast and Furious, which ultimately put almost 2,000 weapons into the hands of some of the most dangerous criminals in North America. Had this simple piece of information been shared among the different federal law enforcement agencies in Arizona, some 200 Mexican citizens would not have had to lose their lives in needless violence, and U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry would still be alive. Obviously, Lana, the family talking about the recent disclosure that the two individuals who were supposedly the high-level targets of Operation Fast and Furious could not ever have been arrested because they were actually paid informants for the FBI at the time Operation Fast and Furious was taking place.
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying.
I mean, if we had all 80,000 documents, Cam, we might know a little bit more. But I mean, we're limited on information. We're limited on information, on the information that we have to discern what's factual and what's not.
Well,
I mean, you keep getting tidbits of information and then little tidbits of information. I mean, the DOJ is going to tell anybody and everybody whatever it is that benefits them.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And unless whistleblowers come forward and give ISA information, do we come up with other factual information? You know, it's like recently Eric Holder said he released 1,000 documents, and I think, what was it, like 376 documents? So, I mean, they're basing this off two FBI informant agents stating that they couldn't be arrested because they were informants, you know, so they can get the big kahuna. Well, there's got to be more to the story than just that.
I got to tell you, I mean, you know, one of the other aspects of the story that sounds really bad, Lana, is the fact that ultimately the individual who was, I guess, he ultimately ended up being the biggest fish that they caught. Still a fairly low-level trafficker, and certainly not anybody that you need to, conduct an operation like Fast and Furious to try to nab. They actually had him on multiple occasions, and they had
Acosta?
Manuel Acosta, and they had probable cause to make an arrest. And it sounds like ATF agent Hope McAllister said no.
$10 bill. $10 bill where she wrote her name and her number.
Exactly, and said, well, we're going to try to make him an informant. Never heard from him. In months afterwards, they end up making an arrest, and again, he's been the highest level individual who's been charged in connection with Fast and Furious. But they had him, months before Brian Terry was killed.
They had him in April, and then a month later they had him in May.
Absolutely. And again,
So
we just kept letting him go.
That's why I say there's more to the story, and unfortunately, we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. Compliments of Mr. Holder.
Right.
And if we had more information as to what the Inspector General has, which I'm sure all 80,000 documents were put on a chip for the Inspector General, if he would release the documents, I'm sure ISA would be able to piece everything together. I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think the information that we have is limited, and I think it's just one piece to the puzzle. There has to be more information than this, because Acosta, yes, they wanted to get higher up than Acosta.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got him in April and then you got him in May, why would you let him go again in May? If he didn't call, you let him go again in May?
Right. I know. I mean, again,
so it just doesn't. And then remember, Holt McAllister took a trip because she wanted to see the vault in Mexico.
Yeah.
To see the guns, as to what they apprehended and stuff like that. So I mean, there's a lot more that you and I, unfortunately, don't have the information. And there are whistleblowers that have come forward that, unfortunately, Daryl Issa can't disclose because the repercussions for the whistleblowers, they're punished for it. They're going to make
Right.
their lives, even if they keep their jobs, they're going to just make them miserable, and get them to try to resign and so forth. So, I mean, with this last tidbit with the FBI and saying that these are the two individuals, I wish that was the case and that those were the only two, and this is really the truth. And I don't think that this is the only two people that played a part in it. And I don't think Acosta, they clearly stated that they wanted a higher up. And Acosta apparently told them that he can get a higher up.
Yeah.
And that's what they went with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Acosta in the whole equation is the highest level that they got at, like what you already stated, which isn't really that high.
Well, absolutely.
We did all this on a prayer, on a $10 bill prayer.
And I got to tell you, Lana, it gets worse. One of the things that Representative Issa and the House Oversight and Government Affairs, Government Reform Committee is going to be looking at is what happened in Texas, where guns that were ultimately used in the ambush of two ICE agents in Mexico were again sold to somebody who was under ATF surveillance at the time, and they did nothing. They stood by as the guns walked into Mexico, and it was not until months later that a warrant was issued and that this guy was taken into custody. So now we're really looking at the possibility that it was not, as the Obama administration has insisted, this wasn't some local operation. This wasn't, just one rogue group of employees in Phoenix, Arizona, that in fact guns were being walked in multiple jurisdictions as part of multiple investigations in multiple states.
No, there was other programs. They're stating they were talking about that there was a program in Florida as well, and there's more people. And the only reason why Arizona is being talked about is because Brian Terry was killed, and the only reason why Texas is being talked about is because Jaime Zapata got killed.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was just the innocent people, the citizens of Mexico that were killed, you and I probably wouldn't even be on the phone having this conversation.
Well, you may be right. And, again, I know that the latest now is that they're actually putting pressure on the White House for the first time. Representative Issa and Senator Grassley have sent a letter to the White House. They say they want to talk to Kevin Riley, who is a former National Security Council staffer who is now, I guess, been stationed in Iraq.
Right, isn't he like an ex-White House aide?
Yeah. And they want to talk to him. His private attorney has said he's willing to talk with investigators. The investigators have said they're willing to do this over the phone so that he doesn't have to come back from Iraq. They're just waiting for the White House to sign off on this, and we will now see if the White House is interested in getting to the bottom of this, if the White House really is as transparent as they say they are, or if the White House is going to put up yet another roadblock in front of these investigators who are trying to get to the bottom of Fast and Furious.
I think it's pretty obvious that the White House has to have knowledge. The stimulus package money was signed over for part of the program. Somebody had to sign. Why can't they disclose who signed? I mean, it's been over a year. Somebody had to sign. They're not disclosing that. So, I mean, I don't believe that nobody in the whole White House was unaware of the situation.
Right.
It's a little hard to grasp that concept when so many millions and millions of dollars were approved for the program.
Mm-hmm.
There's a signature somewhere.
There is, and again, I mean, when Holder's been asked this question, his response has been, "We may never know." Which I mean, again, how do you say that with a straight face? And how is that the response of this administration, that we may never know who actually authorized Operation Fast and Furious?
He says it with a straight face because he still views it that Brian Terry and Jaime Zapata were collateral damage. He's still pushing to try to implement gun control. He stated it at one of the oversight hearings. Well, the real problem here is that we have a problem with guns. With Hank, what's that representative, Hank, who went off on this whole tangent on how many guns get sold at the gun shows and stuff like that. Like, that's a major problem. And they're still trying to push forth because of all of this chaos that it's created, and not for the gun control to go through is even more upsetting to them. They have no regard for mankind. They have no regard. Eric Holder has no regard for the Terry family or the Zapata family. None. They have no answers. The Zapata family was on the news the other day. They have no answers on their son either.
Right.
Over a year. Over a year. I mean, do they think we're all deaf, dumb, and blind? The American people want answers. These two men served their country for us.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, honestly, I think there's a lot of arrogance. I think there's a lot of hubris. I mean, we heard the Attorney General the last time he was before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee complained that nobody gave him credit for all of the good things that he's done as Attorney General.
I laugh when he says that, all the good I've done. He says the DOJ's done nothing wrong with Operation Fast and Furious 2. They've done nothing wrong. Well, you've done nothing right.
I mean, again, you know, and he said again a couple of weeks later when he was at a subcommittee hearing, he said, you know, why don't I get credit for being the one that put a stop to Fast and Furious? And to me, Lana, I mean, that sums up, I think, the attitude of this administration and of the Attorney General.
I would agree with you 100%.
He doesn't want responsibility for this beginning under his watch, but he wants all the credit in the world for it stopping while he was Attorney General.
So my question is, why didn't it stop after Brian Terry was killed? Because Jaime Zapata at that point was killed.
Right.
So when he stopped it, it wasn't when Brian Terry was killed. The program didn't stop when Brian Terry was killed. The program was still continuing on. So when he makes that statement, that's another statement where I sit there and I just shake my head like, well, if you stopped it at the appropriate time, it would have been when Brian Terry was killed, and it was found that there was two weapons at the murder scene that belonged to Operation Fast and Furious. You have a federal agent that gets killed. That seems to me you're the Attorney General, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, Dennis Burke, notified them. To sit there and say that Napolitano did not communicate with Eric Holder is just ridiculous. It's insulting the American people's intelligence.
Talking with Lana Domino, a friend of the Terry family, and I mean, Lana, I know that this has to be. It just has to be incredibly hard for the family to see their son's death politicized like this, to not get any answers from the administration. How's everybody holding up?
I think as best as they possibly can. With any case, especially such a high-profile case, but with any case, you and I both know, if it was just an ordinary murder that happened in a state, and if it was a convenience store robbery, it would still take 1.5 to 2 years if they had the shooter to prosecute him. I think what's the most frustrating is not getting the information. I think the stonewalling is it's like a slap, because Brian wasn't just a Border Patrol agent, and Brian served his country from 18 to 40.
Mm-hmm.
And if you knew him, he lived and breathed for it. He loved his country. So to get your government, your own government, doing the cover-up and the stonewalling, I think is the most disheartening and the biggest slap in the face to the family, more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, if there's justice and people are prosecuted and the truth comes out, I think the family will be happy. If there's never the truth comes out, how could you be happy with that, Cam?
Well, you've got that right. Listen, Lana, as always, I really appreciate you coming on the program, and give our family the best, will you? I know that on occasion some members of the family listen to this program, and if anybody's listening tonight, I want you to know that we're keeping you in our thoughts and our prayers.
And Cam, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the coverage that you do and keeping this alive in the media. Because if it wasn't for people like you, if it wasn't for Cheryl Atkinson, and it wasn't for William Lajeunesse, and you guys keeping this alive, we wouldn't be where we're at today. We would not.
Well, we're going to keep up the coverage, Lana, as best we can. And, again, glad you could join us tonight. And I know we'll be talking again in the future.
All right, Cam. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Have a good evening. Lana Domino, a friend of the Terry family, joining us here on Cam and Company.